Looking for the perfect hidden gem for your next night out? Welcome to Almost on the Lake, where the food is delicious. The service is top-notch. And the atmosphere feels like home. Family-owned and locally loved. Come see why everyone is talking about Almost on the Lake.
Nestled in the heart of historic downtown Wilkesboro, the 1915 offers a wedding experience like no other. Once a federal courthouse and post office, the 1915 combines rich history with timeless charm. From intimate gatherings to full-day rentals, we provide the perfect backdrop for your most cherished moments. With indoor and outdoor options, bridal and groom suites, every detail is crafted just for you. Make your wedding unforgettable at the 1915, Wilkesboro's historic wedding venue, where your story begins.
Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations. Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of Life in Wilkes.
David, how in the world are you, friend?
Well, for an old man, I'm getting along pretty good. I notice I'm getting older every day, but
isn't that a celebration, though?
Well, it beats the alternative.
Yes,
it beats the alternative, and I'm not getting any bigger. I think I've reached equilibrium.
Right.
My doctor said, "What's the deal with the weight?" And I said, "Well, I think I finally got to a plateau. I don't think I can get any bigger because there's no more time to eat."
Right. Because you're so busy making beautiful music, right?
I do love to play. If I'm playing, I'm not eating, so that helps.
Let's talk to another person that's in your collection of stories about great musical people within the region, right? Do you have a title for the book yet?
Come again?
Do you have a title for the book yet?
The working title right now is Bottomland.
Bottomland.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of books out called Bottomland. We're still weighing that, but right now it's Bottomland.
Right.
Because of the musically fertile area and the geographic area that's involved with it.
Right, and to remind everybody again, we're talking about like a 9-county radius?
A 9-county area. Wilkes is in the middle of it, and the reason for that is, this is where I live, this is where I grew up, this is the part that I knew about to begin with.
Right.
But all those things that filtered into Wilkes and the interchange between these counties of all these players, their histories, their successes, their leaving, their coming back, and what's here now.
Has this process for you, can't remember if I asked you this before, but it's worth asking again, has the process for you meeting some of these people in history that you haven't, that you didn't actually meet. Some you have met, right? But you're now meeting them through their descendants.
Yes, and some of them we were lucky to get to while they were still living. This thing started in 2017.
Okay.
The writing of it, and I know just in the case of the Church brothers, we were able to meet with Edwin, who was already in his 90s, and he just recently passed away, and we got to interview him. But to even the families, to be able to talk to them, to see pictures, to hear about the personal side of how they learned, where they went, if they went on the road or if they left, if they went to war, did they play during the military years, what was it like? One whole family was born to the Benfields that we did a story on and a chapter while he was in the military. And he comes back with a whole family before it's over. The whole thing happened during his military excursion. So it's all interesting to me. I knew some of it, but I learned so much more.
Do you feel like as you're going as a researcher now, right?
So I guess you can call it
so
that.
you are going through that research process.
I'm a digger.
So as you go through that process, do you occasionally feel like you're meeting new friends?
Meeting new friends and learning a new appreciation for what some of these folks did in order to play. Mm. I used to tell people when I first did a recording session, the first one I ever did in 1969, I had never had as much money in my hand at one time as they paid me to do this. It was $65, and I'd never had $65 in my hand. I was 15 years old. That was my $65. But it was like, gosh, I could do this. I want to know more about this guy I've been working for.
Right.
And I met people at a studio at that same time, a guy that would employ me for 5 years after that. And there's a whole genre of people there that you learn to appreciate that were right in your back door.
It's amazing, isn't it?
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's
talk about Doc. Let's start going down that road, because I understand he's a very interesting person.
Oh, interesting, sharp as a tack. Doc was born 2 years before the Wright brothers flew their plane. He was born in 1901. And I talk about that because of what the environment would have been like in North Carolina. He's born rurally. He's born right here in Lewis Fork community. And the train had only been in the Wilkesboros 11 years when Doc was born.
Wow.
So it's a very rural area, very, I won't call it poor, but a very common area. A lot of day laborers, a lot of people farming, and he was born into that lifestyle. He wanted to do what he heard going on around him. In the community of Lewis Fork, there were already musicians. There were already people he could hear. And there was something about that, and I understand his motivation. There was something about that made him want to do that.
David, who were some of the other musicians in his area?
The forerunners of the Church brothers, some of their older people, their dad, Albert, and folks like that, and some that are unnamed that we're still trying to find names of. My grandfather Caudle said he learned to play from an old man in the mountains. And he never told me his name, and Grandpa's gone now, and the uncles that were left at the time didn't know the guy's name. But there were several musicians in this area that Doc would have been exposed to. There was a gentleman, Uncle, they called him Uncle Wiley McDaniel, that played a fiddle in the area. There was another, Bill Bullis played the fiddle in the area. Some of these people were from back this side of where the Mount Pleasant community and Lewis Fork community were. But he heard primarily probably banjo and fiddle, because that was the two prevalent stringed instruments in the area. There weren't many guitars at that time. They were more expensive to get a hold of. They were harder to build by yourself. And as in the case of talking about Ralph Pennington, some folks wound up building their instruments. But
right.
It was easier sometimes to get a hold of or hear a fiddle and a banjo. Banjos were made out of everything, from an old sifter that they would take the wire out of and stretch a cow hide or a cat hide. I've seen them made out of cat hide, groundhog hide. The banjo I learned to play on was made out of groundhog hide that stretched over a piece of a wood rim made out of cherry. And Doc grew up in that, and he wanted to learn to play. The legend is, and I sometimes get these instruments mixed up, but the legend is that he had a family member that made a banjo for him, like my grandfather made one that I learned to play on. A family member made it, and it was out of some kind of box. There was one archivist talked about it being out of an axle grease box. It needed to be a round piece of wood. And if you could stretch a hide over that, you had a drum. If you could hew out a neck and put it on there, you had an instrument. You could string it and play it. I asked my grandfather one time, I said, where'd you get the strings? There were no music stores around here unless you ordered a mail order. And what you've told me, I don't think y'all had money for strings. He said we would find a screen door that had a screen broke in it, and we would yank that wire out of there, and we'd get 2 or 3 of them out, and that's what we would twist on these homemade banjos for strings.
Wow.
Crinkled up as they were. I said, what did you do for a bass string? It had to be a bigger string, a wound string. He said, we twist 2 of them together. Anyway, Doc started learning to play the banjo, and he was a sharp-minded guy by all accounts. I talked to his daughter, Judy, and I knew his son, and I still know his grandson. And he was to the point he wanted to get an education. Mm-hmm. And he was still looking at a regular life of some kind of day work. And there was a boarding school in Patterson up here. And once he got his whatever education he had in his early grades, when he was a teenager, he went to the Patterson school. And you could board up there, up 268, you know. And he had chores he had to do there. Part of them was milking the cows. It paid for part of his education. It was a tuition of some kind. And he went to school there, and he later went to a teaching school to where he became a school teacher as a young man.
Interesting.
And I'm unsure about exactly what year, somewhere around the age of 19 or 20, he comes back to Wilkes County, and he's a teacher. He's going to teach school, and he taught young fellas in their mid-teens. And it never did quite work out for him. He just didn't like it as much as he thought he wanted to. And Doc was high-strung by all accounts. He was a high-strung fella. And a high-strung banjo player is a force to behold.
Right.
And he got into it several times with him over discipline in the room. And finally, you know, kids used to carry their lunch in a bucket to school. And one of them had an old hard biscuit, and he got mad at Doc and busted him upside the head with a hard biscuit. And Doc decided he's getting out of the teaching profession. Right. Now, that's the tale from his family. And he was listening to these early records, and this was in the early 20s. He was listening to these early records by other regional artists. Here's what had happened. The major recording labels, of which there were already some, up in New York, the OK label, Victor, Columbia, these labels, they decided to send mobile recording units and field recorders, which usually was an old car with somebody with a disc cutting machine and an engineer and a microphone, into the southern states to record this hillbilly music, they called it. The old fiddler. There were fiddlers' conventions down here and competitions, and the winners had some notoriety. And the labels got to looking at this like, I bet if we'll record some of those artists, we can press records and sell them back to them in the southern United States, probably make a little money. And that's how the Carter family came to be recorded in the 20s in Bristol. That's how the Stonemans became recorded. Well, they had already recorded a fellow named Fiddlin' John Carson, who had won all these fiddling contests down in Georgia. And there was a local group of players, 2 fellas named Grayson and Whittier, that played fiddle and guitar, and they sang. And they were from this area. Whittier was from Virginia, and the Grayson guy was from just up here at a place called Laurel Bloomery, if any of you people know where that's at, still up in the mountains here. And Doc got to listening to their records, and his statement was, well, you know what, I can do as good as they do. And he played banjo, and there was something funky about his banjo playing. Can I illustrate it?
Oh, absolutely.
Just North Carolina banjo players didn't go at things like anybody else did. And the old-time players that were coming out of the woodwork at this time were playing what was called the clawhammer style. And they had this thing where they would go down with the fingernail, you know, and the thumb would play the offbeat, and that was the cadence of what they played. Well, that's that old mountainy sound. Dock, he played that, but he also played a rudimentary roll with his fingers, picking up with his fingers. Sort of a little crippled up roll like that. And the neat thing about that was that not a lot of people had heard that except in North Carolina. People were playing it like Charlie Poole and a couple of other people, and it was a kind of a new sounding thing. And Dock played with a set of picks. He not a lot of banjo players were using picks, and Dock was using some picks. And so Dock decided, I'm going to go try to get recorded. Now, that's just the way he looked at it. Well, it was happening in Atlanta. It was happening in Charlotte. I don't know why he didn't go to Charlotte. It could have been the dates. Maybe they were already in Atlanta recording. I think they probably were. But he hitchhiked to Atlanta.
With his banjo.
With his banjo. And he went down there trying to get somebody to listen to him play. Took him about 6 months, according to all the stories. He had to work in cotton field. He had to work at several public jobs, just whatever he could pick up doing. And he busked, however you want to pronounce it.
Right.
He was a street picker.
Right.
And he'd play on the street for a few nickels and dimes. And he finally got a guy to listen to him from one of the labels. And they said, we'll try you for 2 or 3 cuts. And they cut 4 sides on him and eventually marketed them. And the first time they recorded him was the October the 3rd, 1925. So these records actually sold a little bit, you know, and they said, let's do another session with Dock. He still wasn't making a living with it, but they would pay by the side, and you could make some pretty respectable dollars if they recorded you on a one-time basis for them to pay you to play. And it was based on how many, how many units they pressed, so many cents per unit that you got. If they had to reorder, you were going to make some more. And this went on for a while. They recorded him some more. Then they teamed him up with a guy named Gwen Foster. Gwen was from, I think, Gastonia. And they the label teamed him up with Gwen, and Gwen did harmonica, and he also did guitar, and he could do guitar with a harmonica slung around his neck. So they essentially had a 3-piece band. And they recorded as the Carolina Tar Heels.
Okay.
And this was coming out on a major label. Well, in 1926, they did a single with Dock that was just him with the banjo, and it was one of the most popular songs he would ever record. It was called In the Pines.
Oh, sure.
And In the Pines was a kind of a garbled little tale. It was about the loneliness of where did you sleep last night? Well, I slept in the pines where the sun never shines. But then there's also verses that date back to the late 1800s that talked about the girl that he's talking about in this thing, and she was killed by a train running over. So it's kind of a tragedy story, but Dock wrote some of his own words to it, and I think managed to pull some royalties out of this thing. Over a period of time, I've seen most of his collection. This table wouldn't hold the singles that were put out by him, either by himself on Columbia and later on Victor. You couldn't get them all on if you set them side by side. I think they'd cover up the top of the table and fall off. So many of them, and his family luckily has most of those. 78 RPM records, songs called Who's that? A lot of them are funny songs. Who's that knocking on the hen house door? Traveling Man. I'm the man that rode the mule around the world. Tunes like that.
Fun things.
Yeah. And he's playing that banjo, but he would vacillate between clawhammer and that roll, and it was just different.
That was a unique sound.
It was, and he became known as in advertisements in the record catalogs as the Banjo King of the Carolinas.
Wow.
And once he got that kind of notoriety, Doc was able to play quite a few live performances. And there was probably a period of time that he was actually eating off of it. He was buying his groceries that way. This went on for a long time, and he eventually wound up, he and Gwen, after they parted ways, he wound up playing with another guy that played harp slung around his neck with a guitar that was called the Human Bird because he did bird calls and he did all these mouth-generated sounds,
so another
sawmill
layer
in operation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, another layer of
talent here.
Right.
And the two of them worked together. He was from Purlear, North Carolina, and
Really?
his name was Garley Foster.
Garley Foster.
And Garley played and Doc played, and at the time they were recording, the recording thing for Doc was coming to a close because something happened in 29 that almost brought the whole recording industry to its knees, and that was the Great Depression.
Right.
Record sales went, and the labels were reluctant to spend much money on an artist unless they were guaranteed hundreds of thousands of sales at that time. So as those years and the post-panic years, as Paul used to call them, as that came down to about 1931, 32, Doc's recording fell off to nothing. He and Garley were still playing, though. They were still in the locality. But he came back home, and he became a full-time day worker. Back in Wilkes County, he raised chickens for a living for a while. He did several other jobs, and he raised family. He was married to Annie, his wife, and they raised 4 kids, 2 girls and 2 boys. The girls could sing like birds, and they sang at church. They sang at public events. Doc, they would use Doc periodically if they needed a master of ceremonies. He was an educated man. He knew how to conduct himself in public, and he had a good vocabulary, and they would use him as a master of ceremonies for fiddlers contests, for school things. He became school board member during some of these years. And he wound up working for a business that had been in Wilkes at least since the 30s, I think, because I see their ads in these early Journal Patriot archives, CD Coffee and Sons. It was an auto parts distributorship. And Doc worked there for them in the later years. Doc was a full musician. He had all the musician's habits, including he loved to hit the bottle every now and then, and that's no secret. His family talks about it. I met the man, and they're right. He did like to take a nip every now and then. But those 2 boys he raised were named Drake and Dean Walsh. And Drake became, as a teenager, was enamored with the Grand Ole Opry. They would listen to it on the radio. Drake became a musician. He played some mandolin. He played banjo like his dad, trying to play like Doc played, and eventually made a fiddle player. And he lived out his life famously as a fiddle player. He became the house fiddle player over here at the VFW, where that house band started in the 50s and went until it shut down.
Right.
The first time. And Drake lived most of his adult life playing fiddle every weekend at that. Plus, he'd go to fiddlers' conventions. He'd play in bluegrass bands, do all this stuff. He played with his brother Dean. Dean wound up in another band that was playing on WKBC, and he played for a long time. And then he got kind of out of the music business. He didn't play much. He just became the family man, raised a wonderful singer. His daughter, Kim, great singer. I did TV work with her back in the early 70s at WBTV on the Bill Hefner's show. And but Drake made a fine musician. He was my dad's age. I think he was born about 1930. Doc's grandson, Drake's son, was named Nicky. Nicky Walsh and I started first grade together in elementary school, and by the time we were in high school, Nicky has made a musician, and he's now playing bass in a band we had, the rock and roll band we had in high school. So we were picking with each other.
Third generation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Nick and I still talk and see each other quite a bit. But Nick went on to be a truck driver and make his living doing other things. But we all played music in high school together. In the early 60s, I met Doc. My grandfather knew him really well. Doc was already working the day job. He was working at Coffees and Sons selling auto parts and delivering them. But he still played, and he would play little weekend events here and there. And he was a good friend with Hensley Eller that ran the lumber yard there in Miller's Creek. And periodically, you'd find Doc on Hence's front porch sitting there picking that banjo. And my grandpa wanted me to meet him because I was trying to learn to play banjo. And I was about, 10 years old, I guess, maybe 11. And I went down there, and as would have it, the first time I met him, Garley Foster was sitting there picking with him. Now, Garley had made a construction man, and I think he moved, I believe, to Taylorsville or that area over there and lived out most of his life. But he and Garley were sitting on the front porch playing. So I got to see this act from around 1930 or 31, sitting on that front porch playing just like they would have done 35, 40 years before. And Garley was doing the bird calls. Right. And he was playing his harp, and Doc was singing those same songs, In the Pines.
So, David, when you were there listening to these men, people that you knew about, but you're actually there, I mean, what was going on through your mind?
When I had first heard their records, it was on a crank-up Victrola that we still have in the home. And I remembered when I was 3 or 4 years old, my granny letting me crank that thing. And Pa or some of them would put a record on. And I remember the look of the Columbia label. It was black and gold. And I kept thinking, that's the guy that's playing on this record. And it was magic. It was even more magic to me than seeing people on TV and then seeing them in person, because this was the one that made these sounds. This was the man. And Pa kept telling me, now that's Doc. That's Dock Walsh right there.
Right.
And all of it was mind-boggling to me. Garley was playing an electric guitar. He was playing a Dan Electro that somebody had, probably Hintz, that had one of those amps built into the case. It was a strange little rig that was around in the 50s, but he was playing open chords on it, playing hillbilly and country stuff on it. Harp.
Was he still doing the bird sounds?
Yeah, he did bird sounds. He did a sawmill in operation, and they were all just sitting there. And then somebody would say, Doc, play us so-and-so, and he would play another one of the songs. I remember him doing Traveling Man, and I just couldn't believe that I was seeing this same guy. Plus the fact that I didn't get to see too many musicians live. I mean, I saw my dad. I saw the local guys up next to the house. But the Flatt and Scruggs show that I saw when I was 6, I remember Johnny Taylor and Drake and some of them coming up to the house and some of them rehearsing.
What a deep voice he has.
Oh, he's a bass singer's bass singer.
That's right.
But Doc was, he was just magic to me, you know. And then that role that he had, I didn't have anybody close to me that played the role much. I had seen Gar Bowers play it, but I didn't get to see Gar but about once a year.
Right.
And here's a guy sitting right there in my locality, and he's doing this. And I got to see him again out at Clay Church's store Clay had this big old wooden store there in the middle of Miller's Creek, and that's where the Miller's Creek Hunting and Fishing Club met. And Dock went back in there and played a little gig with them, for them, and had a little entertainment at the store one day. That was the kind of picking he was doing by this time in his life. It was in the waning years, and his health was not good. Like I say, he liked to tee up some. There's a tale one time he and some buddies of his were out just walking through the woods. I don't know if they were musicians or not. And there's 3 or 4 of them. And the tale is Doc told them, said, "Wait a minute, boys, wait a minute. Sit down over there on that log." And he made them sit down, and he hopped up on a stump and preached them a sermon. So he was a jovial kind of guy. I loved to read Dick Tracy comics.
Right.
Nikki said you could see him when he was a little guy. You could see him sitting under the tree at his dad's house reading Dick Tracy. He liked Dick Tracy. But he did like to play, and he kept that banjo down at CD Coffee's. It sat right there next to his big red chair that he was in.
Always ready.
Always ready.
Right.
But the neatest thing was when the folk music revival broke loose in the 50s at the college campuses, and everybody started getting into the folk thing. Here comes the Kingston Trio recording Tom Dooley,
right,
which happened here in Wilkes. All of a sudden, folk music revivalists and archivists are coming to the Southeast to hunt some of these guys up that recorded in the 20s and the 30s, any of them that might still be alive, to re-record them. And Earl Green and what was the other fella's name? Anyway, they came to the area, and they got Doc, and they got Garley, and they got Doc's son Drake together for a recording session. Part of it took place at a home in Taylorsville, and part of it took place at Drake's home here in Miller's Creek. And they recorded it, and it was released by a label called Folk Legacy Records. It was up in Sharon, Connecticut. And that album itself is a collector's item. You can still find copies of it maybe on eBay occasionally. You can find it. It may be on YouTube. I'm not sure.
And those recordings were, they were raw, right?
They were. It was just like we would set up in here, set up a couple of mics and say, go to picking. But that's the best way to experience that stuff.
Sure. And you could hear it. I mean, I've heard those albums before.
Unprocessed.
And exactly. It was just real, like you're sitting there in the room. Yeah. I like that.
Folkways Music used to do that out of New York, and they would come down to the Fiddlers Conventions here at Union Grove and places like that and record albums back in the 50s and 60s. And it was just as the acts would come off stage, they'd go into a little barn or something, and the field recorders would be standing there saying, "Pick us a tune."
Yeah.
But Doc did that.
Can you believe how big that festival got?
Oh, it's part of national history now.
I mean, I think from what was the thing in New York, the
Woodstock.
Yeah, Woodstock. Of course. So Woodstock, they're all there, and then what do they do after that? Because these people were discovering this kind of music, and then they come to North Carolina. I remember spending some time with Casey and talking about their place in Union Grove and just how many people showed up. It started smaller, but then 200,000, then that gets pretty intense.
From all over the United States.
Yeah.
And Merlefest has done that in a similar situation.
Right.
But you look at the effect of it in the 60s. By 1967, here comes a mainline movie, Bonnie and Clyde.
Right.
What did they use for the soundtrack? They used the original recording of Foggy Mountain Breakdown by Flatt and Scruggs. What did they use for the soundtrack of Deliverance? They used a song that Arthur Smith wrote, which he sued him for,
right.
and rightfully so, of a banjo tune, dueling banjos. It had its effect nationally on the arts and on a lot of people learning to play music.
It's interesting that how things can go from something that's regional to international in not a long period of time.
Well, old Doc, he hung in there, and he affected a lot of people. That role was not Folks didn't ignore that. That was a North Carolina type thing. How fitting that Earl Scruggs would have been the one to make it popular.
Oh, sure.
And of course, Snuffy Jenkins down in South Carolina had something to do with that too. But still, it was a North Carolina type of anomaly. And Dock Walsh was one of the first people ever archived playing that on a record.
Have you ever done it? Have you in a session? Have you found a moment to pull that out?
Yes, I've had people that want a folk sounding banjo, but they don't know exactly what they're asking for. They just want the presence of it. Right. Usually some producer that says, have you got something that just sounds old or mountainy, not necessarily clawhammer? I said, I got the very thing. Just a little half roll that he did that predated what became bluegrass. And it had its formation right here in the bottomland.
Let's talk about that. I mean, we're talking about a lot of musicians, and we'll continue to do so, people that have historic significance. But when we look at those sounds, those things that maybe they came from the heart of the people too, the difficult times, the sounds that were there. You can hear the soulfulness in some, the pain in some of them. Right. Well,
stop and think. If a man has spent 8 to 10 hours plowing behind a mule, and I can say this as a gardener, even with a powered tiller, you can spend some tiresome days, particularly if the ground and the weather ain't being all that cooperative. But if you spent, say, a 10-hour day working on a farm, and it's the heat of the summer, or if it's cold weather, whatever it is, and you finally got a little time to sit down and eat a piece of cornbread or something, and there is no electricity, there is no electronic entertainment, something you need to lift your spirits. And some people turn to matters of faith and read Bible by the candlelight, and that's a great thing, best thing you can do. But there's something in a human being that wants to express itself, I think, in music. I think it's why people hum. I think it's why people whistle. And I think it's where the blues came from. The moaning of a hard day put into you know how you'll just sometimes go, well, sometimes that takes on a musical connotation. And when they played a fiddle, if they were feeling mournful, that sliding around on those notes, that kind of reminded them of that. And maybe that's where some of those songs came from. If they were feeling fired up, if they'd had a little bit of the old hair of the dog, they might get that banjo out and they might just rap a fire out of that thing for a few times and pat their foot. It expressed what they were feeling at the time. And I think that's a very real thing you're talking about. Whatever you are, it's why you see, I think it's where you saw rock and roll come from. When you see some kid, 17, 18 years old, jump out here with a Les Paul and just absolutely, with all the distortion in the world, jump into a guitar solo, he's feeling his oats, and he's got to put that into some kind of expression. Well, better with a guitar than a lot of things he could do. You ain't going to wreck a guitar and break your neck. You know, you might break a string or two, might deafen yourself.
So are you suggesting that the power of music has the ability to allow us to express ourselves in a safer way and maybe even in more of a soulful way?
I think if people were singing together more and picking music for each other, not letting the computers do all of it. Get out some real instruments, play some real music, write some real songs, express your faith with it if gospel's your thing. Whatever it is, I think we'd be fighting less. You think about all the musical cultures in these countries that are at each other's throats periodically, and I keep thinking, what are you destroying in the process? Not only human beings, but your culture. I looked at things going on in the Middle East some years ago when they were destroying all these historic things, landmarks, buildings, you know, in the process of trying to create another genocide. And it was like, you're destroying your history. The next generation of people ain't going to know where you came from. What tragedy. I mean, I just think if we picked a little more music, we'd be a little friendlier with each other.
I think that's a good idea. Why don't you do that and take us out maybe with a little Dock Walsh influence?
Here's this is the song that put him on the map. If he had one that was more popular than any of them. He, like I say, he wrote a few of the verses, I think, himself. He certainly did his own arrangement to this. And he would start out with a little strumming thing, but then he'd break into that roll. And this goes all the way back to 1926. In the pines where the sun never shines, and you shiver when the cold winds blow. Oh, I minded what my grandma said, then I wouldn't be here tonight. 'Cause I've been in the pines where the sun never shines, and you shiver when the cold winds blow. The longest train I ever saw went down that Georgia line. The engine, it stopped at the 6-mile post, and the cabin never left the town. Now, darling, don't tell me no lie. Where did you stay last night? Well, I stayed in the pines where the sun never shined, and I shivered when the cold winds blow. Here's a sad part now. The prettiest little girl that I ever saw went down a walking the line. Her hair, it was of the curly type, and her cheeks were rosy red. That train run back 1 mile from town and killed my girl, you know. Her head was caught in the driver wheel, and her body I never could find. In the pines where the sun never shines, and you shiver when the cold winds moan. In the pines where the sun never shines, and you shiver when the cold winds blow.
Wow. Wow.
Doc, he was a piece.
Yeah.
You know, he passed away in 1967, and they buried him back up at Lewis Fork.
Is that right?
Yeah. He started there and he ended there.
Yeah.
That's gone on to bigger and better things, I surely hope.
Yeah, that was great, David. What a great visit. And Doc's life is one that probably not everyone remembers, but this is certainly a great effort.
You know, record collectors worldwide still collect his records. It's amazing how many people know about him, but it's amazing how many people locally don't.
Yes.
They know the family, but they just don't know what he did. He was on a major recording label before the Depression. And Garley was too, from right here in Wilkes.
Yeah. What a great part of heritage that is for not only the people here, but as you said, worldwide.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
It's a pretty good thing.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.
Oh, darling, now, darling, don't tell me no lie. Where did you stay last night? I stayed in the pines where the sun never shines, and I shivered when the cold wind blows.